So again, thank you for coming tonight, and we have lots to talk about, so that's great. She told me I could talk as long as I wanted, which is a dangerous statement. So it's amazing what you learn over a variety of years. So King County government, we like to say that we are the government that gets things done and is quiet about it, unlike the council sometimes across the street. So there's a lot going on in King County, and one of the things that's really important is that there are a lot of big social problems that we are working with as a society. And so if they were easy problems, they would already have been solved. So we have the more difficult problems before us. And sometimes a decision made in isolation may look like a good decision or a bad decision. But there are lots of different aspects to why a decision is made. And so I think it's really important for people to, you hear a soundbite of 15 seconds and you think, oh, that's the right answer. But you need to know that there's more to it than a 15-second soundbite. And I think people should get to know an elected official and somebody you trust where you can say, could you tell me the rest of the story? Because there's usually more to the story than the 15-second soundbite. And so making sure that people realize that there's a balance in our society and we can't just make one group happy or another group happy. We have to look at what's going to be the best in the long term. And I think that's really important. And unfortunately, we're seeing a lot of very vocal people making huge decisions and interfering with decisions that need to be made. We recently had a situation in the county where we were building a building some people did not like, and their protests slowed the building up by a year, and several $1 million were put into dealing with that. And ultimately, the building is now done, and it's unfortunate that that kind of money was put into some issues that should never have had to be paid. So the 2019-2020 budget I'd like to talk about basically. We do a 2-year budget, and then on the off year we make the adjustments every quarter if something has happened or we're underspending, overspending. Steve knows this very well because he was one of our budget analysts and did an awesome job. And so the budget there, King County is the 13th largest county government in the country. There's over 3,000 counties, and we are the 13th largest. So we are larger than some states. We have airports, we have hospitals, we have all kinds of things that people don't really realize that we do. And so it's exciting how many different things that we do. But we cannot take money from the airport account and put it into the hospital account, or the hospital account and put it into the roads account. Those are enterprise accounts, and you cannot move money, if you don't want to be arrested, from one account to the other. So sometimes people will say, well, you have this big $11.9 billion budget. Yes, we do, that is true. However, we cannot spend all of that on different things. We can only spend $1.8 billion of that, number right here, whoops, the $1.8 billion of the general fund. That is the fund that can be spent on whatever we decide we need to spend it on. And as you look at it, 72% of that money goes into safety and justice. So when people say, we need more criminal justice, we say, yes, we agree. However, it's now to 72%. And people say, we have a lot of money. If we could get everybody to stop committing crimes, we would have lots of money. But we haven't been able to figure that one out quite yet. And then 14% for general government, 3% for the assessors, 2% for elections, 3% for debt service. And that is really important because we have a very low debt service amount, which means that we have the highest credit rating of a government possibility. So that helps when we go to bond for pipes and such. We have the highest credit rating, and like your credit rating, the higher credit rating, you have the lower interest rate you get to pay. We have 5% going for health and human services, which is an interesting phenomenon. It is not required by a county government to pay for health and human services. That's not one of our basic requirements, but we believe it is so important that we do those things because we believe it's a proactive way of trying to reduce the other part of the criminal justice system if we can deal with people's mental health issues. So we do have money out of this account that goes to Health and Human Services. But the citizens of our county have been very generous. They've passed the mental illness levy, the Best Starts for Kids levy, the Veterans and Human Services levy. So all of those monies also go into human services. So while it says that we are only paying 5% of the general fund into health and human services, that is not the only account that is getting those monies. And then natural environment is 1%, and local services is 1%. So that is where the budget money is going. When you look at our county, it is very diverse. There are 9 council districts in this county. Each of them have about 234,000 constituents. So I always worry that someday they're all going to call and wish me happy birthday, and I will be deluged. There are a lot of people in each district. The largest one is our district. And as you can see, it goes all the way up to Skykomish up here. Yes, Skykomish is part of King County. And you have to go through Snohomish County to get there, but it's ours. All the way down below Issaquah, all the way through the Valley Cities, and then Sammamish partly, and Redmond partly, and part of unincorporated Woodinville. So all of this is the 3rd district. So it's a very busy place, 1,107 square miles. So one of the things I've worked on for a very long time, we are a regional and a local government, and we are rated very highly by Governing Magazine as being a great regional government. But we did not have any local government foundation. It was pretty much whatever I could beg. Which is not the way that a government should be run. So in this last couple of years, Fred Jarrett, who some of you know, decided that he would help us in looking at how do we take the local government function, which we are responsible to about 200 and a little over 250,000 constituents, and provide them a local government as if they had a real local government, as Redmond has a local government, or any city has a local government. If those people were actually a city, they would be the 2nd largest city in the state. And they had no direct foundation other than a few of us trying to piece it all together. So what we were able to do with Fred's work and others working together is to form the Department of Local Services. Started January 1st of this year, and so we are into 9 months of it. And it is doing amazing things. I am very pleased with the progress. Not perfect, but really, really improved. So now we have taken the road services and broken it off from transit. Transit is its own department now, and road services is part of Department of Local Services. And the permitting division, including the on-site septics, is part of the new department. It used to be called Deeper, and now it's called Permitting. And one of the reasons we like that is so that every day the employees go to work, they know what their job is to try to help people get their permits. So we have also put the OSS, the septics, in with the permitting division so that people are not running down to Eastgate and then back to the county and then out to the unincorporated areas. So these two are permanently under the director of, the executive director of the Department of Local Services. He is in Dow's cabinet, so he is in the executive branch and is in the cabinet. So he has the daily ear of the executive. And that is very, very important, so that on a daily basis, the executive knows what's happening in the 2 main departments. Then the next thing that happened is we said, these are all the services that the county provides for the people in the unincorporated area. And we are now contracting with, say, the sheriff's office, just as if the sheriff's office contracts with the contract cities, like Woodinville and other cities, Shoreline, that we contract with. So they now have a contract. So at the end of the contract, we can say, this is how we feel the quality of service was, and begin to say, we want more of this, we want less of this, so that we can be responding to the exact needs in that community, which is very...
How long are
the contracts are for 2 years. So then we will up the contracts each biennium. And the idea of forming a government by a contract so that the people have input to rate what their government agencies are doing, I think is very exciting. And I have talked to the National Association of Counties that I believe that this should be the future of all governments, to be able to be contracting individually by departments for what is it that your outcomes are. Not just how much money are you spending, but are you getting the outcomes that we want? And in certain parts of the county, there's certain kinds of crimes, and in other parts of the county, they're dealing with other things. So making sure we have the right personnel in the right area is really important. So we are contracting. We have 4 of them signed. Again, we're new at forming this. So we have 4 of them already signed, but they are making out what are their outcomes and being able to be rated now, which is very exciting. We have a director, John Taylor, who is wonderful. And when I have a question or a problem, I just call John and say, here's the issue I need. And he says, okay, council member, I'm on it. And those are my happy words for the day, because I know that he will be on it. So another thing that is happening, and I know there are a lot of people concerned, people don't understand always what kinds of programs they are and what those programs mean. One of our programs is the Farmland Preservation program. This is a very important program to our county because most of us like to eat. And if you eat local, it's much better for your body, you get better vitamins, and it also reduces greenhouse gases because your food isn't being transported in far distances. So we have 60,387 total acres of farmland in King County. So right now, we have preserved, under this program, 15,293 acres. So that means that those will be farms forever. Those have had their development rights purchased. So they cannot be anything else but that, unless they can find equal value property to switch. And there are certain places in the county, like the Snoqualmie Valley, where there is no farmland, because that is one of the top farmlands for fertile soil in the entire country. So in that case, it will never be changed. And so we have a lot of people being very concerned about the farmlands are going away and that there won't be enough place to farm. And we actually have land where we are working on a farming bank where new farmers can come and learn how to farm and opening up more land for that. So I want you to know, yes?
Is the other farmland, the other 2/3
yes.
being farmed?
Yes, it is being farmed. And so those farmers know that they could put it in the Farmland Preservation if they wish. But we are very hopeful. And we have a group called the KCD, King County Conservation District, that goes out and helps farmers on how to do things in a more environmentally sensitive way, helps them with how to clean their ditches so that their land isn't soggy and unfarmable. So we are working very closely with our farmers.
I don't want to ask too many questions. Okay. Is there a plan for the other acreage, a long-term plan?
As long as it's in farming, it's fine. It will be willing sellers, so if the farmers want to sell their acres, that's fine. We always work with willing sellers. This is the county council, and most of them have representation in Seattle. There are only several of us that have any unincorporated area. So I have the most. Reagan is below me, and he has the next most. Joe has Vashon Island and Skyway, and then Larry has some other small areas of unincorporated. The rest don't have hardly any or none. And so that's important as we deal with issues that have to do with rural areas and farming, even though the law says that all of us are the local government of the unincorporated area, they don't directly represent it. And so sometimes they'll say, I'm going to represent my district, and I'm not really going to act as if I'm the local government, which is something that I'm hoping over time will change. This is a project that I've been working on now for 12 years, and that is that in the year 2012, the landfill was supposed to close. So in 2007, I asked who is going to deal with what are we going to do next when the landfill closes. And everybody said, no big deal, we don't know. We'll just freight rail it to someplace else, nobody cares. Well, that wasn't a good answer. So I decided to take that on as a topic, and I've spent the last 12 years traveling the world on my own time to look at waste to energy plants and to analyze them. And so I've been to 13 of them now, and I am very impressed with what they offer and that their data is online 24/7. My favorite one is the one in Hamburg, Germany, and I believe that the energy that they're producing, that they recover 98% of all the metals that go into people's garbage. The plant down in West Palm Beach, Florida says they actually reclaim about $200,000 a year of people's coins that they drop in the garbage by accident. So however we can get the money, we're fine. So it's amazing. And out of the waste energy plants, you get your metals back. You get, when it goes through the thermal chamber, which is very, very small, it heats it up to 1800 degrees Celsius. So you get the metals out, and then you get these teeny little rocks, and they can be used for a roadbed, and they have an 8 times weight-bearing capacity. And so the Hamburg cargo ships unload onto the ports that have been built in this because they have been very impressed. We have 1,500 miles of roads in King County, many of them not in good condition, and having the ability to have bottom ash to build these roads as a sustainable way is very important. I'm also very concerned about the fact that we are having leachate problems at the landfill and odor problems and a number of other problems that we would not be having if we were using the technology that's all over Europe. So there will be a report coming out, I guess I should say on that one. There's a report coming out next month in October that will talk about what are all of our alternatives, what is the most cost effective, what is the best for the environment. And this report was actually done by the PSB, the budget office, because they wanted to be totally neutral in what suppositions were made, and I highly respect that this report was done with great accuracy. So I'm looking forward to it coming out. If you have not signed up for Alert, that is the website, /alert, and you can decide how you want that information to come to you. Do you want it on your cell phone? Do you want it on your home phone? Do you want it on your computer? Do you want it text? And what area do you want to know if there's an emergency? So you outline the areas, the kinds of emergencies, and where you want. And I have several phones, and so when they ring at the same time, and my iPad goes off all at the same time, I'm like, okay, pull over if there's been an emergency, and I better figure out what it is. So this is really good for us to know about and to be prepared, because eventually there will be some kind of an event, and being able to have this emergency information is really important. We also have online information about what we used to call 3 days, 3 ways, and then we called 10 days, and now we're calling it making it through, because some disasters are going to be more than 10 days. And we need to be prepared in our house with enough water and enough supplies that we can make it at least 10 days. So making sure that you have the kinds of medicines and bandages and things, batteries, whatever, that you are truly prepared. And one of the ways I think people can do a good job of getting prepared is do a camping trip in your own backyard and figure out how long you can survive before somebody has to run in the house and get something. And then you'll know if you're prepared. So that's important. So the next thing that I'm going to talk about is the Growth Management Act. This act was written in 1990. And like most things that are 30 years old, it's time to do some dusting. And so there have been a variety of problems with the Growth Management Act that have come to light. So the legislature heard from counties all across the state, and they then hired the University of Washington Ruckelshaus group to do a study. And they met with many, many people, and then chose people across the state to do longer interviews with. And I was one of the people that got to do the longer interview because there are a number of things that are happening. So their report is out now, and it's big. So I have it in the car, so when I'm not entertaining myself some other way, I can continue to read through the Ruckelshaus report. It's very interesting and very comprehensive. They will be giving that report to the legislature during the next session. And it's going to be very important for the legislators to really look at what these things are and to be prepared to make some changes. So they passed it in 1990, and it requires both state and local governments and county to manage their growth, and that is important. How many people do you think that we are expecting to come to King County every single day between now and the year 2050? Take a guess. 1,000 a day? Really? 5,000 a day?
I was going to go with 1,000.
Well, you guys are really thinking big. 100 people a day are coming to King County. So we will be having 1.8 million more people. Right now we're at 2.2. So between now and then,
people are leaving?
no, coming.
Do you know how many people are leaving?
Well, we haven't charted that yet, so we don't know.
It's not late, it's just pure growth.
Pure growth, yeah. So we are 2.2 million now, and we expect another 1.9. Some people will leave, some people will die, and we haven't figured that one out yet. But when you think about that many more people showing up, that's a lot of people. And where are they going to be? And some of the decisions about where they're going to be, some of the places are on fault lines that we've discovered. We have got a new piece of equipment now called LIDAR. And LIDAR is able to like x-ray into the land and find where there are fault lines and where there are slide areas. We have literature and studies now that we know things that we had no idea before. So our data is much better. And so we are planning places that are on an earthquake fault line. Probably not a good idea to build a 40 or 60-story apartment house on a fault line. Mm-hmm. So looking at where are these places and are they still the right places? Originally when the growth management line was designed, it was supposed to be flexible. Over time, you can go back, and in our county, you can go back every 8 years and say, do we need to move it here or do we move it there? But over the years, people have said, we don't want to deal with it, we just are never going to move it. And that was not the design of the original act. So where are we going to put these people? So one of the things we had to do was identify the potentially critical areas and natural resources. So we don't want people in floodways, because we don't want them flooded. We don't want people on a steep slope. So we had to look at where are the places we don't want people for their own safety to be building. So we had to identify those. And where are the wetlands? Then we had to decide where are going to be the urban growth areas. And they wanted to have the biggest part of the density in the contiguous urban areas. We have urban areas like North Bend and Snoqualmie and Duval and Carnation. Those are actually urban areas. So they are scheduled to be enlarged because we didn't want the people that live out in the unincorporated areas to have to go shopping all the way to a far city. We wanted cities close enough by that they would be magnets and not have to have people go for a grocery store, 30 miles away. So those are, where are we going to have the rural people? And then we had to do comprehensive plans for all kinds of different, whether it's shorelines or all kinds of different things, land use. So all of these plans come together, and so it's a lot of work. We have a team that constantly works on those acts. The Growth Management Act started with 13 different factors, and now the 14th has been added. That's the Shoreline Management. But the Growth Management Act said originally these 13 things have to be in balance. And now it's 14, but I'm going to talk about originally when it was only 13. These all have to be in balance. There's no order about this is more important than that or this is more important than that. They are all important and they all have to be in balance. So I'm going to go through each of them and talk a little bit about that. So the first one was they wanted most of the growth to be concentrated in the urban areas. And that made good sense because that would be cheaper for roads and cheaper for some of the essential public facilities. However, as we're looking now at Seattle and all the buses, even the buses can't hardly get through anymore because there are so many people and so many buses. So there has to be some balance. Once the Growth Management Act was designed, they said, okay, here's the urban area and here's the unincorporated area. Some of this area needs to be part of a city. And so each city was given what they call the PAA, Potential Annexation Area. This part next to you can someday become you, but only when you get so that you need to grow. This is the area we want you to grow. And then this area farther out, we don't want annexed. Forever it will be farmlands and it will be large plots because that's how we want to keep the balance of a good environment and forests and trees and yet have the density over here. So that was the balance. And so they would say, okay, here we want, 18 dwelling units to the acre. And over here we like to have 10 or 12 to the acre. It's changed over time. And here we want 1 to the acre. And here we want 5 to the acre. And here we want 50 to the, 1 house to 50 acres. So as then people started saying, okay, on those 1 acre parcels, now it was time for me to build my house. I've had that property in my family 30, 40, 50 years. I'm ready to build. And people are saying, that's sprawl. That is not sprawl. That was exactly what the plan was, that there would be a certain amount of houses out here and that they would help then to maintain that property because when you have people living on the land, they make sure the noxious weeds are cleaned up, they make sure that the underbrush is taken care of so that we don't have massive forest fires, and so the land can handle a house per 5, 10, 50 acres. So that is not sprawl. It was part of the original decision, but people are saying today that it's sprawl, and that is not accurate. They wanted to encourage it. Now, they said that in the unincorporated areas, we only want you to grow about 4% per year for our county. Each county kind of chose what theirs was going to be. For our county, we said no more than 4%. And we've been right about 2.3% growth. So we have been very judicious in our growth. Okay, to reduce the inappropriate conversion of undeveloped land. And this is part of the debate because the debate is, should there be single-family houses and what number of single-family houses? And one of the concepts I think is important is that we need to have all kinds of housing across the county. So if you are a single person and you work 15 hours a day and you want a small apartment, that's great. If you have 4 kids, that small apartment may not be appropriate and you might want to live in a single-family house with a little yard around. So making it okay for the stage of your life where you want to live is really important. Okay, then we needed regional transportation and looking at the multimodal different ways of being transported. I was in a meeting today and they said that the target, even with all the use of trying to help people get conveniently on buses and rail, is that will be still around 5% of the mode share, which means that we're still going to have about 95% of the people in cars. So one of the things that they're trying to do is develop what they call TODs, transportation-oriented development, which means that you'll have a bus hub and then the apartments or the houses around that won't need as many cars. And that is true, but they are designing it so in many places there are 0 garages, and that is not okay. And so that is one of the formulas that we need to be looking at. And today we were at a meeting where we were talking about different places in the county where they've actually done the analysis on how many people in these transportation-oriented development areas actually own cars, how many cars. and what should the formula be. And I think that's important because saying 0 is not practical. What ends up happening then is people go parking in the neighborhoods, and then they make the neighbors not very happy. So that's an important thing that we're working on. So one of the things that we do is we put together what's called a concurrency map, and we have had many concurrency maps over the last few years. And in each area, these are what they call travel sheds, and each of those different colors is a different travel shed. And we measure how long it takes to move around inside those travel sheds. And we set limits on how much time that could be. Originally, if you were going to build, say, a subdivision, you had to measure what the travel shed movement time was, and then you had to come up with how you were going to add to the transportation system in such a way that you wouldn't slow down the traffic for everybody else. And then you had to have the municipality put into their 6-year comprehensive plan what that was going to be so that it could be funded within the 6-year period. Nobody has the money to do that anymore. Nobody. So the plan to do that is a little disingenuous if nobody has the money. So one of the things that we've been talking about is how do we get the money to do that? And PSRC, Puget Sound Regional Council, actually went through how much money does each municipality currently put in, what are all the needs across the county, and then what is the difference? And it was spellbinding. Okay, so...
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
How come nobody has the money? What's your opinion?
Okay, good question. And I did not pay him to ask that question. The reason that we don't have the money is because in the unincorporated area, only people who live in the unincorporated area pay the road service. When you get incorporated, many of the roads did not go with the subdivision or the business community. So all the revenue, which would come from the property taxes and the business taxes, went into the to the city that it was going to, and the expense of the road stayed with the county. So we had no way to pay for it because that just got traded off. And King County has incorporated more than any other county in the state. We have 11.25% of the county that's unincorporated. Snohomish County and Spokane have 28. Everybody else has 43 and above. So if you have half of your area paying into it and half not, you can get away with that. But when you have 11% and the rest not, it doesn't work. So that is where we are in a crisis now. So that's the first crisis. Not everybody pays into that fund. Second crisis is that as the property values have gone up, the taxing rate has gone down. So by law, you can charge $2.25 per thousand assessed value. Right now we're at 1.8, $1.80. So each house is paying about $90 less a year than they used to. So that is a serious issue, which needs to be solved. Affordable housing. Affordable housing was supposed to be in all, notice the word all, economic segments of the population, and to have a variety of residential densities and housing types. And that is really important. And again, what we said a minute ago about if you're a single person, or you're an elderly person, or you've got 4 kids, you might choose a different kind of housing. So housing is broken into a variety of segments. If you make below 30% of the AMI, average medium income, you are probably going to be in subsidized housing because you can't afford the rents or such if you're making less than 30%. Between 30 and 60%, you can have some subsidies. Between 60 and 80 is where we need to be building housing that we can help people get into in a more affordable way. Above 80%, the market will take care of. And if we can have more housing that's built in the 60 to 80%, then the people who are currently in those units can move up to the more expensive units and have some different opportunities. So we're looking to try to do a little bit in each category as we deal with affordable housing. And I think that's going to be really important that the law says all communities, all types. And that's not what's happening right now. So we're going to have to be looking at that. Okay, the next one is economic development. And this one is really, really important. They all are. What was supposed to happen was you were supposed to balance the amount of jobs that are in your community with the amount of housing. And it didn't have to be a one-for-one because somebody under 8 is not going to take a job. And not every family has both people working. But you at least need to be able to figure out what is the average number of people that are working in your community. And then that amount of jobs was supposed to be in balance, and that has not happened. And so we have commuter cities, like say Sammamish, for instance, where a very large percentage of people come from Sammamish and go other places to work. That is not what was intended. And so in the new policies that are being written, it says very clearly that there needs to be more housing where there are lots of jobs. But I asked them, it's not written so clearly the other way. Could we bring businesses out to where there are houses? And the answer is yes, but we haven't really gotten that clearly to the citizens. And we have interest groups that don't want that to happen. But that is not what the law said. And as far as I'm concerned, you don't get to pick which part of the law you like. The law is the law, and it was supposed to be in balance. It is not in balance. So we need to look at how do we balance where the houses are and the jobs. And not just jobs, but we had a situation last year where they said we want a lot of warehouses in this area. And the city council said we don't want warehouses. The people in this community want office space. And so making sure that you have the right kind of buildings to bring in the businesses that people in that area want to work on. So when they passed the Growth Management Act, GMA, they said the deal is that we're going to take the businesses out of the unincorporated areas and we're going to move them into the cities. And so if you live in the unincorporated area and you want to buy a car, well, you'll go into Bellevue or Kirkland or any place else that has a car dealership. So Bellevue or Kirkland or whatever city you buy it in, I use those because I've done that in both, they got my money and the unincorporated area didn't get my money. And so they aren't able to help themselves with their own tax dollars because you cannot buy a car in the unincorporated areas. Those are high-ticket items. And so the original intent was that the municipalities nearby would figure out how much tax the people were paying in their cities and then rebate that to the county. That was the original intent 30 years ago. We have tried that several times, and I would get my mouth washed out with soap if I told you what was said after that. So that is not working, and so that is unfortunate. So we are working on a sustainability element to be able to say you cannot leave unincorporated areas with no taxing base and no help. You have to be able to do your basic services. So the cities have a utility tax, a business and occupation tax, a property tax, and so they have a variety of taxing sources. Unincorporated areas, because they don't have hardly any businesses, don't have a lot of business tax. They do not have a utility tax, and so it's all on the property tax pretty much, which is very different because the unincorporated local government has to do exactly the same functions as a city does, but with far less revenue, and that is not okay. So we have to look at how are we going to develop economic development. And they say, well, in the rural areas, it has to be rural. And so I asked them, what is the definition of rural? Well, you can have a horseshoeing station. I don't know how many horseshoeing stations I need. Horseshoeing? Now, Enumclaw needs it. But there are places in the county that don't have any horses. So they probably don't need it. So my definition is the people who live there, what do they need? What do they go shopping for so that they don't have to drive far away to get their basic needs? So we have hired in the county an economic development person to go and start looking at where in the areas in the county can we develop businesses that will be the economic engine. And we won't be able to make the deficit up, but we are looking at least being able to contribute to more sustainability. And under, you will probably love to know this, under R205.E, 201.e, it does say that these rural places should be, rural commercial areas should exist. And nobody seems to know that exists, and so you do. And when we start doing that, we don't want people freaking out. It is the law. And without it, it has caused the problems of not having a sustainability. We have had 2 studies done. First study in 2014, which said we had $350 million a year deficit. And then people said that was too high. So we hired an outside firm to come in and check our numbers, and they said that number was too low. That it's actually 500 million. So that's the number we're using, that we need 500 million a year for the unincorporated area, which again, remember, could be the second largest city in the entire state for their budget. And right now we're getting about 96 million. So there's a big difference between what we have and what is needed. Yeah.
Are they talking to the neighborhoods then when they're talking about economic development and doing these studies? Are they going out to those areas and saying, what do you need here?
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's part of what we have in the community service areas, now that we have local government, to be able to go out and look at that. Okay, so property rights. Property rights are very important. And this is one that is of some issues also. Private property shall not be taken for public use without just compensation having been made. The property rights of landowners should be protected from arbitrary and discriminatory actions. That's the law. Yes.
So this is eminent domain, basically.
Right. And eminent domain is like taking castor oil. You really don't want to take it unless you absolutely have to. And, you know, we have done it because we needed to, but all of us didn't want to. But at certain times in life, you just have to do what you have to do. So, anyway, on the property rights, one of my concerns is that they're basing buffers on a tree that was 200 years old, that was 192 feet tall. I don't know if I've seen any recent trees in the valley at 192 feet tall. And does the buffer really need to be that big? So we have a science group looking at what is the necessary buffer size. So right now, you may have a 200-foot setback from a river on your property. And while they say it's not a taking, you can't do anything with that part of your property. So you're paying taxes on it, but you can't do what you want. You can walk on it, you can say it's beautiful, but you can't, you know, build a barn or anything like that on it. So in my mind, some of the buffers that are extraordinarily large are a taking. And we are in a debate right now with the Department of Ecology on this very topic. And we're doing science studies. The current law says you use the state or you use your own local science, but we haven't had our own local science. And we have been working now for 5 years on trying to get everybody to agree what is the best available science. Getting everybody to agree to that has been a long process, and we're still working on it. Okay, permit processing. So there's a lot of permits that you have to get to build. And so we wanted to make sure that we were able to make it as clear as possible and what are the permits that you need. Natural resource industries maintain and enhance natural resource-based industries, including timber, agriculture, fisheries, encourage the conservation of productive forest lands and agricultural lands, and discourage incompatible uses. And that is really important, that we have it all zoned out. So we have a map of where all the mining areas are in the county. So if somebody is going to buy property, you really do need to look at the land use maps to see, is there a mining right next door to you? Because if somebody then decides they want to mine that rock, they have the right to do that because it's zoned to do that. So when that happens, people get all upset. I bought this and it was beautiful. I had no idea that there was a mine next door. Well, do your due diligence to know where those are, because there are mining areas that are in the unincorporated areas. So we try to figure out where those are and let people know in advance. Now here comes the question. How much of King County is open space, slide zone, forest, or owned by federal government, so you cannot build on it. How much of King County do you think qualifies as one of those? Take a guess. Let's have some guesses.
30%.
30%, 30%, 60%. You think? 15. 70. Wow.
Jump
Okay.
out there.
20. 15. Okay, 15 is, it's, oh, 50. Okay, 15 is the most common answer. So you have the most common answer. However, it's wrong, but it is the most common answer. The correct answer is 62%.
Wow.
So,
Double?
most people do not realize that, and they keep saying, he knows because he used to work for the county, he knows. So 62%, and we have a special group of King County Conservation Futures people who go around to figure out where is the most environmentally sensitive areas and where are the best trailheads, where are the best trails, and they buy property every year, and we currently own 62% or have some kind of an arrangement where 62% of the county is open. Now, that's beautiful, but I also have, again, as we talked about balance, what is the balance to that? Okay, those properties are not paying property taxes in full or partial. So when people say my property taxes is too high, it's because you're paying on your own property plus part of the 62% that is open space. So that is a factor we have to balance. How much open space can we have and still afford our property taxes? Yes.
Back to your question.
Sure.
What portion of that is government land? So national forest, whatever.
Very
Um,
high percentage.
Hmm?
Like about 40, I think.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's something that we have to look at, and especially if we have people thinking it's 15 and it's 62, it's very different. And so one of the things we have to decide is what is the right amount of land that you can't build on? Obviously, the answer 100% is not a good answer, because then we wouldn't have any place to live. So that's not a good answer. We already own 62. So the number is someplace between 62 and 100. And so then we need to start looking at where are we going to put the 1.8 million people that are going to be here between now and 2050? How much land are we going to need for housing? And where is that going to be? So that we can do the balancing. And so it upsets people when you say, oh, we're going to build out here because we only have in our mind 15% of it open space. But I think as a community, we need to decide what is the right number. Is the right number 65? Is it 70? Is it 75? I don't know. But we have to decide that, and soon, as a community, because it impacts property taxes and it impacts housing prices, which impacts quality of life. So now you know the right answer, and ask all your friends. Okay. Then open space and recreation. We are very careful, as we know now, that we have lots of open spaces, and we are very careful with our water and developing our parks and recreation areas. Environmental protection, that is very important, and we do a lot of environmental protection at very high standards. Then we have citizen participation, and everything that we do. So, I'm sorry, before we get into that, those are the 13 original. The 14th one is Shoreline Comp Plan. We just are working on our Shoreline Comp Plan right now, and we're negotiating with the Department of Ecology. And again, part of that I think is so interesting is that we can put these giant buffers out in the rural areas, and then we turn around and say in the urban areas, we have so much impervious surface and not a lot of vegetation and no buffers to the shoreline. But over here, we wouldn't be able to do that. So it's a little disingenuous, and I think it's important for the dense areas to have open space and trees and buffers so people can have places to go. But that hasn't been what's happened. In the new park the levy that just passed, there will be a lot more open spaces in the urban areas, the contiguous urban areas, so that we can have some more open space there. Okay. One of the things that's really important is citizen participation and coordination. And it's important, but you can die from too much input. After a while, you get paralysis. How long do you do this? Do you listen for 10 years? Do you listen for 8 years? We have an issue before us that we have been listening to now for 4 years. I can tell you that there is not a dang thing anybody can tell me that I haven't heard in those 4 years, or read in an email, or read in the newspaper on that topic. I'm pretty much clear on what the issue is. So at some point, people have got to make action. And that's where we are having some problems as a society. Yeah.
As a society or as a council?
I think as a society. I don't think it's just our council. I know that Seattle City Council has a joke that they have paralysis and that they have process on top of process on top of process, but I don't think it's only them. I think in dealing with this building I was telling you earlier about, it was a required building by state law. The other building was a mess and not safe. And people had comments. We heard the comments loud and clear. The media went through and looked at the old building and said, oh my gosh, we had no idea it was this bad. And those of us on the council knew how bad it was, because that's what we do. We study this and we know these things. And at some point, in my opinion, we should have said, now's the time, we've heard enough, we're going to make a decision. And it took us over a year of extra time dealing with the process of the process of the process of the process. And it cost us millions of dollars. That is not okay. And while I fully believe in citizen participation, we have to, as a society, agree that at some point decisions have to be made. And we have another issue coming up right now that I'm very concerned. And in a report which will come out next month, they said in the report that in any place else in the country that this topic, which I'm going to, could be done in 4 to 5 years. But in King County, it will take 8 to 10. And because it will take that much longer, it'll be an extra $6 million. So is it okay that 30, 50, 60 people can slow it up to cost another $6 million?
Is that going through the courts then? Is that what you're saying?
No, it's not going through the courts. It's
So
going through the
why,
council.
you say you have something now 4 years in the making. Why can't you come to a decision?
Because the citizen participation and getting
But
everybody.
there's a limit to that too, whenever there's
There should be.
citizen participation.
Yeah, there should be. And I think we all need to start talking about when is that the time to make the decision. How much money do we want to put into this hearing and that hearing and this hearing and that hearing? So it is a problem. And I think the fact that it's going to come out in a report next month that this process will cost us $6 million more, I think it shows that there's an issue that we need to come to grips with. And if you hire elected officials to make decisions, they need to make decisions. And when they say, I've got enough information now that when I get more information, it's not something I haven't heard before. And I realize that this is connected, sort of like your arm's connected to this and this is connected to that. We've got that. And our staff tells us, you have to watch out for this and look out for that, and we study it ourselves. So at some point, we need to make the decision and not put those kinds of monies. So this is another issue that we're dealing with right now. And in one of them, we had several people who chained themselves together and closed down the streets of Seattle and all kinds of things, which made us have to hire armed guards around this building 24/7, adding costs. Okay, public facilities. The one I was just talking about was a public facility. Some public facilities are considered essential public facilities, in which case the government makes a decision and there's very little input, but there are some essential public facilities that take an awful lot of input, sometimes years. So we do have the essential public facilities necessary to support the development and also to make sure that we're providing a good quality of service to people. One of the other things that's near and dear to my heart is historic preservation. I love historic preservation. I love driving out and seeing barns in the unincorporated areas. I love seeing old theaters and things that we can preserve from our past. And King County has a floriculture, which is also a separate taxing district. And in the floriculture, we are able to save a variety of historic buildings and reuse them, repurpose them, so they don't end up not being used in the future or being torn down. Shoreline Management, we talked about as the new one that has been added. And the comprehensive land use plans. We plan to plan of the plan of the plan. Again, when you want to know why things cost a lot of money, it's because we're planning on the planning and we're talking about planning on the planning. And that's partly under RCW, which is the Revised Code of Washington, 36.7A.070. And these are required by most counties, not every county. Some counties are losing population, which is very different. And some counties are so sparsely populated that they don't have to do the GMA. So there's a few counties that don't comply with GMA, but most of the 39 do. So they're required to make all these plans. A land use plan, a housing plan, a utilities plan. They can be all in the same plan, but plans all together. It has to include a capital facilities element, a rural element, economic development element, a park and recreation element. And then these plans go with what they call the GMPCs, growth management policies. And then we coordinate with a regional plan, which makes another plan. So there are lots of plans. If you like plans, there's happy reading, which is why my eyes are needing more glasses. So King County, the comprehensive plan is the long-range guiding policy, and it covers all the things we just talked about. And you can make major changes every 8 years, and then the midpoint for 4 years, you can make some changes. But every year you get an opportunity to make minor technical changes. And sometimes we have to figure out, did something happen, like say an earthquake or a slide zone. So in that timeline, then we have to agree that yes, we can do this because we've had an earthquake or we've had some kind of unusual anomaly. All right, so all of this has been studied in the Ruckelshaus report. And this is the one that they're going to take to the legislature. I am hoping that the legislators, number one, will read it, and number two, that they will start looking at what are the suggestions that elected officials all across the state, this was not just one little group here, one little group there. They interviewed over 2,500 elected officials. So they got a really good cross-section of input. And surprisingly enough, it was very much the same. So they are going to have to come up with what are we going to do about making these updates. And I've been working with them on a couple of the issues, but the main one I am concerned about is the economic sustainability. We can no longer tolerate that there be any place in this state where they cannot help make themselves sustainable by having the right amount of revenue to match their needs.
How many pages is that
Executive summary I have not read because I'm going through the entire thing. So it's about this thick, the whole thing. Yeah. If you want some of this, we're going to see my car. Okay, so the next topic is the King County roads. This reminds me of what we're headed for, and I don't want to turn them all into flower basins.
Are those considered roundabouts then?
Yes,
Like
kind of,
roundabouts?
yes. Some of them you need. I took some people out to Fall City one day to talk to the roads people about some potholes. And one of the people said, Councilmember, you do not have a pothole. You have a minor swimming pool. And I said, thank you so much for understanding. I need this fixed. So, but the problem is, this is the account that has no money. And that's what frightens me. Every other account, there's a way of getting the money to make it work. This is the account that literally has no money. So I cannot make money or print money. I would like to some days, but that's not legal, so we won't do it. We have 1,500 miles of road and 182 bridges. That is a lot of bridges. And I went back east and talked to the bridge expert in the federal government. When he heard I had 182 bridges, he turned to me and said, we should be best friends. And I'm like, I'm good with that. One of the problems we're having right now, we have two main problems on this. When that bridge fell down back east a couple of years ago, the federal government said every bridge in the United States needs to be tested. That bridge model was a very common way of building bridges. And so they said, if this bridge can fall down, then all of its other prototypes can fall down. So we want you to measure all these bridges. So that was the first problem. And the second problem was they said the trucks are heavier than they were in the early 1900s, surprisingly enough. And so those trucks are on these very old bridges. The lifespan of a bridge is calculated at 50 years. Guess what the average age of a bridge in King County is? 50 years? What do you think? Over 50. How much over 50?
75.
75. What do you think?
65.
65.
62. He doesn't get to.
Some of these are older than mine.
I think it's around
65 is correct. So, 65. I know, he's a
Insider
ringer over
information.
there. But that's good. It means that his county time has been very helpful. So 65 years is the average length of our current bridge structure. Every bridge is rated on a quarterly basis of its safety points from 0 to 100. And when I get that, I go in my office, close the door, and sit by myself because it's not a pleasant report to read.
Wasn't there a high percentage of bridges that are considered you shouldn't use them at all?
Yes. And we will have 35 bridges by the year 2050 that we either close or reduce their weight-bearing capacity. 35. When people find out that the bridge in front of their house is not going to be there, no bridge is not a happy thing because it's not good to drive your car into water. It doesn't work. So that was part of the problem. The second problem is that it used to be that if your bridge was less than 18 feet, it was on the local government to pay for it. Over that, the federal government would help you on an 80 to 20% ratio. And that was very good. And they had a separate bridge account, so you knew that this money coming was for your bridges. And that was very, very good. Well, a couple years ago, they put the bridge money in with the roads money. So a lot of people said, we got to fix the potholes because nobody knows that underneath that bridge is falling apart and the part of the bridge is no longer touching the ground. And I've seen some bridges that literally one of the pilings wasn't matching the ground. Not a good thing for a bridge foundation. So they said, we need to know on all these bridges. And the ones that are to be rebuilt or have been rebuilt have new culvert requirements. So many of the culverts are now 2 and 3, 4 times the size of the culverts that they are replacing. And by doing that, it's adding more costs. Plus, there is a rule that you can no longer put the pilings in the water. You have to have it on the land. So what used to be an 18-foot bridge may now be a 40-foot bridge because you have to have a line of sight. And if you're going to move it back, you have to level it out by line of sight. So we are going to be replacing these bridges with much longer bridges, with much bigger culverts, and we don't have the money because it's not put as bridge money and roads money, and there isn't enough. So this is a nightmare waiting to come, and that report will be out in 2022, and I'm very concerned about that. So this is the problem of what we're doing. So this is what the county is calling managing the decline. That is what the goal of the county is right now, is to manage the decline. That makes me sad every time they say it, managing the decline. I'm going to sit here and just keep making it so that it doesn't get much worse, but it's going to get worse. That is not how you run anything as far as I'm concerned. So here's where we were. This is the data from 2014, and it's even worse now. So here's what we actually have. From property taxes, we get about 90 million. We get about 80 million. We get about 16 million for gas tax and some grants and such. So we really get 96 million. So that's what we have. According to this, we needed 350, but that number is now up to 500. So here's what we have. Out of this money, we have certain non-discretionary things. These are like service charges, debts, costs, for the road service division. Those things have to be paid. Then we have safety things that we definitely do not want to not take care of. We've got to take care of safety things. The next thing is regulatory. So the regulatory costs. None of these things are things that we can change very much. Then that leaves us about $20 million, well actually about 10 here, that can go into maintenance and preservation. So we have to be very careful right now for every maintenance and preservation dollar we can possibly get. So we're hoping to get to at least this. This is what we're managing the decline. Here's where we are now, and we're hoping to continue to work to manage the decline. I do not think that is a good decision. I think that we need to solve the problem and figure it out, which means we need to figure out how to get to here. So if we have 200 million or more, it would be a moderate decline. And then this would be to maximize the road system and improve some mobility. And this one would be to improve the mobility and add some capacity. What does that mean? Okay, when we first hit the recession and we knew we didn't have enough money because the values of the housing went down during the recession, which meant that because it works like a seesaw. When the values of the house go up, the taxing rate goes down. When the values of the house goes up, the taxing rate goes the opposite. So instead of paying the $225 per thousand assessed value, they were paying less. So we had, at that point, we had 605 employees doing the work. And we had to start laying people off. So we continued from 2006 all the way to 2016 laying people off. This was a very traumatic time for these employees because the person next to them was no longer working, and then the 2 desks next to them are empty, and the 3 desks. Finally, we had to close a couple of floors and put the remaining people together. So this was very difficult. So we laid off about 43% of our employees in order to make ends meet. Very hard time. So we also had some problems with the fact that we don't have the money for capital improvements. So during the years 2008 to 2013, we were able to plan for 88 projects and 17 different programs. And this is a fairly healthy way to be working. Then over the next biennium and to the current biennium, we have reduced that by 70%. So in the last biennium that ended in 2018, we had 33 projects and 8 programs. And in this biennium, we will end with 1 project and 10 programs. In the year 2025, this budget will be zero. That is when I finally got people to understand you need to listen to this. This is no longer something you cannot listen to. You need to know in 2025 there will be no money for capital road improvement. That got the attention finally of the legislature, and I've been meeting with legislators, 2 of them this week, to say this is a problem that needs to be solved. So if you were to maintain the road on a basis that we would like to be doing, because it's the right way to do it, it costs about $2.97 a square yard to do the routine maintenance. If you don't do that and you need to repair, it comes down to around $37 a square foot, that same amount. If you don't repair it, then it goes into rehabilitation. So rather than paying almost $3, now you're paying almost $80 for that. If you still don't take care of it and it goes into reconstruction, that same square yard is $152 per square yard. And then if you have to just completely tear it back up again, it can be hundreds of dollars. So this is really, really important. We have to make sure that we stay up in this area as much as possible. We are at the place now where we are starting to get into this area. Whoops. Upsets me just to think about it. So we are over here in this area, and so we are going to be putting out a levy lid lift request, which is at this time where people are complaining about property taxes, it's a very hard decision, a very hard decision. But if we don't do this, it's going to cost so much more. So my comments are going to be, do you want to pay $37 a square yard, or do you want to pay $200, $300 for that same square yard? It has to be fixed. Because if we don't fix it, then the underlayment has to be fixed. And we have so many places in the county where the underlayment is starting to go. And that is not okay. And it's not anybody's fault, except for the fact that the state formula that figures out how this is going to be funded is broken. And it's been broken. And we as a legislative body on the council have been down for years to Olympia saying, fix the formula. And basically what they said is we have our own problems and we have some things we need to do, and that's really not our problem. And that is no longer an okay, and it really wasn't ever okay. Yes?
So many of these roads are now incorporated, and we're not going to county's not getting any money, but still maintaining them. And that was a deal that was made in the incorporation. Is there any way to approach these municipalities and say, these are your roads too? Your citizens are living on these roads.
I did not pay her to ask that question. Yes and no. So we're calling those roads orphan roads. We did that in 2016. We went to Olympia and said, we have 21 lane miles in 60 different segments across this county that are now completely surrounded by your city. So we have 1,200 feet over on Doopy Hill Road, and I was talking to a legislator today, and I was saying about this example, that here on Doopy Hill Road, there's a sign that says King County. 1,200 feet later, it says ending King County, and back into Sammamish, because we own that segment, and we should not be owning a 1,200-foot segment. And, you know, we have places in Lake Forest Park, all across the county, where we own a block. In some cases, we own from the center line to the far curve. That is not a good way for anybody to run an efficient government.
That was just bad negotiations at the time.
Yes, it was. See me later, I'll tell you who did it. So, anyway, we went to the legislature and asked them to look at this and say, this cannot be. Cities, you will take the roads that are inside your jurisdiction that you are surrounding. And they went ballistic. It was horrible. So the legislator said, we're not going to pass this bill.
You know, it doesn't make sense, because in their, if for that amount for them would be minimal, but added up, it's major for.
Yes, because we have to move from our yard in Fall City all the way out to Lake Forest Park or down to someplace else in the city. Yes.
So two of the roads in Redmond that I'm constantly asking about, and I get a flip-flop answer, is Redwood Road, Highway 202,
Yes.
and Avondale Road. Redmond doesn't seem to know whose responsibility it is to enlarge that road or change that road or fix that road or maintain that road, at least. And I say that carefully because every time I've asked about it, I get told that it's King County's problem. But if what you say is true, it runs right through the center of Redmond, so how can it be King County's problem? So my question here is how does that all work in together with the municipal budget, the county budget, the federal budget, and the needs of the Growth Management Act? Because if you're going to put all of those people in Woodinville and Sammamish and Kirkland, and you want them to come to Microsoft, AT&T, Blazing Bagels, get a coffee, they've got to have roads to get there. How does that all work together?
I would say it's not working together, and that's the problem. Yeah, that's the
I
problem.
do remember.
Right.
So,
So what's the solution for that?
well, the solution is that we have to start looking at the formulas to set this up. So the formula that is right now, and so say for instance, the road in front of my house, say they've got a 30-year bond on that road. And then for some reason that road isn't being annexed. It should be. Well, even if it is annexed, the county will still have to pay that bond for the 30 years. It's still the road in front of your house, and now it's part of City X. But the 30-year bond, which may be in 29 years, the rest of the people in the county need to pay for that. So, you know, the South Park Bridge, I would bet that most people in this area, if you said, where's the South Park Bridge, they wouldn't have a clue. But they're spending $6 million a year to take and pay for it. So we still get stuck with the bill, even though they have been annexed. That is not fair. So there needs to be a formula that says, okay, if there's a 30-year bond or whatever the years are, 25-year bond, and you get annexed, you still pay back to the county that bond until it's paid off. And that is not part of the code. The fact that there's a cap on how much money can be collected when there may be a specific need, that's a problem. And they did not change in the GM, in the Growth Management Act, GMA, that at what point is there not enough money coming into the roads fund to be able to sustain it? And that's what I've been talking to them for years. I think that number should be 30%. So when you as a county get 30% of your people paying for it and 70% not, and in the studies it's been very clear that over half of the use of those roads are people who live in the urban areas, and they don't pay for it. And they're getting the tax dollars from the people who do live there, buying their cars and their products inside those cities. So they get the double benefit, and the people that are living in the unincorporated area don't get those benefits. So the formula needs to be changed, that when you get to, and I'm proposing the 30%, that it automatically becomes a countywide tax. So it's all of our responsibility to take care of these roads. We tried to propose that with the cities. We went into a task force about 1.5 years ago, and we said, this is the amount of money we need. We need $400 million. And we're okay with you picking some of your arterials that are really important and adding them to the project list. Maybe bringing it up to $500 million. And then we together will go to the citizens with this project list so people don't wonder, what's this money going for? We will have the exact list. You will know exactly what roads are going to be fixed. And so they worked for months on this plan. That was the project goal. We need $400 million. You can add some other projects. At the end, they had the proposal. I want you to tell me what amount of money, knowing we needed $400 million, what amount of money did they come out of that task force saying they would put into it?
2.5 million.
2.5 million.
Nice.
110. 200.
40.
Because it was after you left.
40.
40 is the correct answer. They knew that we needed
10%.
10%. Yeah. So then we talked about that, and we said, okay, what do we do about this? And my thought was, we have waited 30 years for them to fix this problem at the state level. And if they're not going to help us, and if the cities who were supposed to help are only willing to give 10%, they will say, I fixed your problem, I gave you 10%. And I'm not willing to say 10% to solve my problem. I need 100% to solve my problem because that's what makes it solved. And
Is anybody looking at the cost to the economy of not having these roads? I mean, that's a motivator, right?
it should be a motivator. It should be a motivator. And when we start closing roads, they have predicted that 70 miles out of the 1,500 by 2050 will be gravel. And that is not okay.
Well, because that's going to affect your commute to get to Sound Transit, to get to the bus stops, to get to anything that you need to do. It will, exactly.
And there's a certain
Downward
coffee shop that we should be going to.
Right.
Yeah.
So, if I had this right, there's
Yes.
11% of Kingdom that's still unincorporated.
Yes.
Is the county looking to get rid of the 11%? That part of that?
Okay, that is a very good question. If we get rid of the 11.25%, that will only make the problem worse.
Okay.
We don't have enough tax base now, And if we get rid of them, that will be zero tax base. Zero is very
Well,
different.
living in unincorporated King County, and I haven't seen it all, of course, it's pretty sparsely populated. You're not getting a ton of taxes from here.
But if it goes to zero, then we won't have.
Well, you still have incorporated King County.
Yes, but we can't get them.
11%.
Yes, but they are not paying towards this. The state formula says they don't need to. The state also says in the Growth Management Act that a certain amount of the land is designated rural, and rural can never be part of a city. So that is 6%. So we have 11.25. We could get down to 6, but at this point, I don't want to rock the boat. The boat's in enough trouble that I just don't want it rocked.
Can we find out where we are on a map?
Yes, yes you can. So this is what I wake up in the middle of the night thinking about, because this is where we are. We're in a crisis, and I hope that we can get enough people to understand that we need to go to Olympia and tell the Olympia representatives this is not okay. And I met with several of them this week again, and I will tell you several of them are getting the picture. So I was very happy about that. We also met with Congressman Adam Smith about 3 weeks ago and talked about the idea that there should be again a bridge account and there should be a roads account, because it's important that even if the citizens don't know that the support under this bridge is rotting, our bridge people know that, and we need to fix it the minute we know it.
So, yeah, what's your liability if you know it and the public doesn't know?
I don't want to find that out. It's very scary. Okay, so that is my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any more questions that you might have. Yes?
I came here specifically for 2 things.
Okay.
I'm live in unincorporated King County, one of the last places where you can do fireworks.
Yes.
It's very rural. It's along green space. The watershed is out there, and I've contacted your office trying to find out how do I go about doing this.
Yeah. So you have to fill out a petition
Right.
with your neighbors, and then it goes before the council. To
Is
see.
there a contact in your office?
Yes, his name's Cliff, and I will give you that.
Oh,
Anybody else have any questions? Yes, you're mostly good too. That's right.
so we're also noticing quite a change in air traffic since Everett opened.
Yes.
I don't remember ever being told that that was going to be an issue in our area. Was King County told?
You know, I haven't followed that issue. I'm sure that there were plenty of public meetings about that. And I love public meetings. It's what I do a lot of the day. So I'm sure that there were plenty. But it wasn't something that I focused on in my county. Yeah. And you bring up a very good issue. And I was talking to one of the port commissioners about it, that we actually are going to need more airport space. So, you know, we should have a conversation in the year 2050, 2070. Where will the next airport be? I spent some time at the airport over the holiday for Labor Day. The place was busy. So at some point, if we double our population, I know that the airport's expanding, but at what point can they no longer expand? And then where are we going to be? So these are questions that have to be decided, and they're very tough conversations, but they do need to be held. And I think having people like you who are knowledgeable, you know how much of the county is open space, right? Everybody remember the number?
6.5.
How much?
Oh, wait.
62%. Good. 62%. Very good.
Wrong answer.
Yeah.
Wrong question.
Yeah.
Wrong question.
So
Right answer, wrong question.
yeah, right answer. So, you know, as we are doing things, and there'll be some reports coming out, and I will get some information page. If you're not on my broadcast, you need to get my every other week broadcast that lists all the things that are going on in the area. And as we get into budget, there are times when I will say, if this issue is important to you, you need to write letters to the other council members, or you need to come and testify, or this meeting's being held. And, you know, somebody said to me the other day, I hate government. And I said, well, you know, that's sad because that means you don't like anybody in this room. You know, we are the government, and so all of us together are in this, and so it's not okay to say you don't like the government because it's us, and there are tough decisions. That's why it's important to stay up on them and find somebody that's elected that you trust, that you can go to and say, explain this to me, so that you can know the facts, and when people say things that aren't accurate, that you can say, no, I actually know the facts. And I know for some people it's time consuming, but it's important. If we're going to be a healthy, happy society, we have to have facts, and we have to trust each other, and we have to work together. And it is hard decisions. And we got to make hard decisions. Thank you. We have to make them. And I think, you know, I was talking to an elected official this morning about, and you probably saw this, WASDOT, the State Department of Transportation, they actually make out a form. We can build this road at 100% cost if these things happen. But if these things happen, it will be less. I mean, it'll be more. So it's backwards, sorry. We could build it at this cost, at like maybe a 60% surety. And then, but we could find artifacts. If we find that, then this is what happened. We could find a pipe that we didn't know was there, which happens frequently because lots of old maps are not accurate. And then it would add this. So you've got all the variables of what could make it more expensive, and then they also talk about what is the mitigation. And that is also a problem. Nobody has decided the formula, back to formulas. What is the amount of mitigation that should go into a project? So if you're going to build something that is adverse, how much money should you be putting into something that's good to try to balance that? Guess how much mitigation we put into a project? How much? 3%. How much? 3%. 3%.
Yeah, that's 3 to 5.
Yeah, that'd be my
Really?
guess.
So the answer is we have no idea.
No idea.
We have no
Because every
idea.
project's different.
Yeah. Every project is different, and I would guess that some of them are over 50%. That is not okay for two reasons. One, we don't know. That is not okay.
Yeah.
And we don't have a formula. Again, back to formulas. I like formulas. I know you do too.
Yeah.
We need formulas to figure out what is the mitigation cost. And secondly, we need to figure out what is the cap. Is it okay to say, I want to build this road, and if everybody just leave me alone, I'm going to build this road, it would cost, say, $1 million. But after everybody else has come in and told me what to do, that road is now $6 million, or $5 million, or $4 million. Is that okay? And I think to have that discussion as a society, how much more money are we willing? If we say this is X, is the cost, but because of all these other things, whatever they are, and they're all good, and I'm not saying they're not good, but is it okay to be 2 times X, 5 times X, 50 times X? And at what point then do we say, okay, we've made the target of what our mitigation is, and then we're not going to spend anymore. And maybe on this one we're going to go way over because it's near the sensitive area or whatever. Or on this one, it's out in the middle of nowhere, and it's not necessary for that to happen because there's another culvert that's blocked down the road, and it's not going to make any difference anyway. Making those decisions is tough, and but we have to, as a society, then say we are going to know this information, we are going to publish it, and we are going to then agree that I don't care if X number group or that group. We had a group last week that sent me a 17-page letter on something they didn't like, and the last page said, I sent you a 198-page attachment for your viewing pleasure. So that is not okay. So at some point we have to say, let's make the decision together. Let's not be angry with one another because you thought it should be 6 times the cost and you thought it should be 2 times the cost. But come together and say, what is reasonable and why did you decide this is the amount of mitigation? And for heaven's sake, let's know what the percentage is. We do not know that. So these are the things that keep me up at night, which make me excited about being an elected official because there's lots to fix. And we have fixed a lot. The Department of Local Services is on track to being great, and I'm very excited. It's not perfect, but when you know what we used to have with no budget and no criteria, and now we have our own budget, we have criteria, we have contracts, we have come so far, but it takes so dang long. I'll tell you one last story. I went to a conference of the Courts of the Future, and all the think tanks of the courts were there presenting what could a court do to be more efficient. And I was in the audience with about 500 people, and I got so excited when I saw one of the things on the screen that I made a kind of screeching sound. And I got a text from one of our King County employees. I was in San Diego. He had no idea I was there. I had no idea he was there. And he texted me and said, "Councilmember Lambert, are you in San Diego?" And I went, "Yes, how did you know?" And he said, "Because I just heard you screech." And I'm like, okay. So then he texted me back and said, "Does this mean I have work to do?" Because he worked in the IT department. And I said, "Oh yes, trust me, you're going to have work to do." So we saw all these exciting things, and we brought back, one quarter of the future. We set it up, and it was, revolutionary. But it has taken 10 years now for all the things that we did at the Quarter of the Future, and the judges just this week brought me the last project that is now in the budget for that plan 10 years ago to be done. And so I told them, they said, "Will you support this?" And I'm like, "Are you kidding me?" Yes. And so they said, "Well, that's why I brought it to you. You'll support it." And I said, "But here's the deal. As soon as we get this approved in the budget, you have to promise me that at the next Quarter of the Future conference, we are all going to together, and we're all going to see the same thing at the same time and decide what is it that we can do to make the courts even more efficient in the future." Because I have no idea what is the new technologies and what are the new systems. But the Quarter of the Future system does know that. So we're going to go together and start doing these things. So that's what I love doing, is bringing the technology and trying to get the formulas changed. But it doesn't need to be a 10-year process. And when I read the report the other day about the waste to energy plan, that was what we choose, we'd have an extra $6 million and double the time. That is not okay. And I think we as citizens need to talk to our neighbors and friends and say, no. We've already talked about this for a year or 6 months or whatever the appropriate amount of time is. Now it's time to make the decision. Because in the case of the Family Justice Center, it was required by law. We had no other option anyway. And what we have created will be open soon. And I toured it yesterday. It is beautiful. And I believe that people going in there for the next 70 years will feel respected, and that we will have good outcomes because we put a good job on making a building that's required by law. Doesn't mean you need to like it, but it was required by law and done well. And I think children's lives and family lives will be better because of it. But it shouldn't have taken that long. And so that's the thing I can use your help with, and helping talking to your neighbors about the GMA. And when somebody says, "Did you hear that they want to change the GMA? The whole world's going to fall down." Or recently I was told that I want to do away with certain kinds of farming. And I told it to my farmers, and they're like, "What? You are our advocate." And I'm like, "I know that. But you need to be out saying that. You need to know the facts, because people don't always talk about things because they know all the details. And that's why I appreciate you being here, to know the facts and the figures, and to know that there are people running for office, people who hold office, that you need to be there for their support. An elected official takes barbs you would never believe. My mother says to me, "I cannot believe what you put up with." And I said, "Well, I've had experience in dealing with it. Your skin gets a little thicker over time, but you also know that you know what you know. And you know, sort of like being a parent, you know that you know the answer on how to take care of this child or this project or whatever the thing is. And you just keep going forward because your goal is to do the very best job for the citizens you possibly can. And if that's your goal, you just keep doing it, and hopefully over time people will see that that's true. But we need ambassadors. So please be somebody's ambassador. And I hope that we can all work together to get our roads and our things together. Thank you for taking